right across to Maria. Maria, I'm not quite sure what to say to introduce you. I've highly recommended to the students to read your book, The Rise of the DEO. It was where I first became aware of you and your work at Hot Studio, and was, have been, you were preaching to the converted, and in my case, I sort of believe very deeply that design should be, and always will be fully realized in itself as a strategic discipline, really orienting business to understanding what they should be doing in the first place, and not just making pretty objects. Hopefully the objects we make are pretty, but that's not the primary goal. The primary goal is to generate useful things in the world that make our lives better in some significant ways. And you've done that in your studio at Hot Studio, and I'm not even entirely aware of what the current iteration of what you're doing is about. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you and hearing your wisdom. So Maria,
all right, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to get into my story a bit. It's good. And it's great to see everybody. I would love, if possible, if you can turn your camera on so I can actually be speaking to a bunch of people. Thank you for those who already are on camera. Thank you. It's really a privilege to be talking to you guys today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story as a design and business leader. I'm going to talk about what design means a little bit, because I think it's confusing. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about how design is in everything that we do. You don't have to be, we're all born creative, and we all have designers in us. And so I'm going to talk about the value of having the superpower of unleashing your designer in you. Let's see, I am, feel free to use the chat if you have questions. I have it open. I'm going to share my screen now. So let's see, Keynote. Okay, Dan, give me the thumbs up if it's, people could see it. Thumbs up? Great. Good. All right. So first of all, this incredibly cute girl is me, obviously. I'm probably about maybe 14 years old around here, 13 or 14 years old. And ever since I was a little girl, I wanted to be a famous artist. My uncle was an artist. There's a lot of creativity in my family, and I started painting at a very young age. And so every Saturday I would go and take private painting lessons with Fred Sklenar. This is a painting of my dog Chester. You can see a little bit about him. You can see him on the very bottom of the picture here. And started painting anything that I could. Eventually, I just worked on my quality and my craft and my passion for art. I started getting better at it. And, about maybe 15, 16 years old, I started doing dog portrait paintings. And I would charge about $25 for a dog portrait painting. So I didn't know it at the time, but I was a very smart businesswoman at a young age. When I went to high school, I moved up to painting jean jackets. And I was getting like a whopping like $100 for a jean jacket. You could see this is from 1980. And as a matter of fact, this painting, any of you familiar with Molly Hatchet? Probably not. I'd be very surprised, maybe Neil. No. This this painting actually is on the cover of Molly Hatchet album. And this is a painting of my uncle Frank's work, Frank Frazetta. And so it was kind of very meta. This is my uncle painted his album cover, and then I got paid to paint an album cover of his painting. So very early on, I was able to really tie together being incredibly passionate about something, focusing on quality, and knowing how to monetize it. And this became a superpower for me. I went to art school, and when I went to college, Cooper Union School of Art in New York City, where I'm from, and I studied design. And I didn't really get design very much in art school. As a matter of fact, I thought I started taking classes out of curiosity, like, what's design? Why is this valuable? I don't get it. Pick out typeface, pick out an image, add some white space, slap it together, call it a day. That was my view of design at the time. And but when I was in college, I met this man here in the middle of the picture, Richard Saul Werman. And Richard Saul Werman, he used to design guidebooks, and I started working for him right out of school. But when I was in college, he came into my design class my senior year. He looked at all the students in the room, and he said something that changed my life. He said, "You are all full of shit." I was like, "What?" And he said, "Design is not about making something pretty. Design isn't about putting elements together on a page. Design is there to help people make sense of the world." And that was the defining moment in my life, that I knew that design was about using design to be in service to others, to help people make sense of the world, to help them understand, to help them navigate through complex ideas and patterns. And that's when I got what design was. And then I graduated college. I went to work for him right out of school. And then pretty much a year into working for him, he got the gig to redesign the Pacific Bell Yellow Pages in California. And I was, in my very early 20s, and I was like, "Oh, free road trip to California." So I say I accidentally moved to California. And I surprisingly stayed there, because when I got to California, it was the dawn of the digital age. It was 1987. And suddenly computers were appearing on desktops, and they were tools for designers. And I was really fascinated about the intersection between design and technology. And it was very early pioneering days. People were all trying to figure out how to use technology to do design. And while I was in working for him, my job was to design all of the maps for all of California and Nevada, all the maps that appear in the Yellow Pages. And how many of you are familiar with the Yellow Pages? Do you know what the Yellow Pages is? Raise your hand. Some of you, yes, no. Ooh. Some of you, Neil, do you want to tell your students what the Yellow Pages were?
The Yellow Pages is what the internet used to be.
Exactly. It was
a vector of everything on paper.
Yes, the Yellow Pages came once a year, and it landed on your front stoop in front of your door every year, thick, made of yellow newsprint, and it had phone numbers and information of every single thing in your community. And this was the way communities communicated back in the day before the internet. So when Richard was asked to redesign and relook at what the Yellow Pages could be, it was an amazing project to treat the Yellow Pages as a form of information for your community. And the Yellow Pages had a lot of maps, and I was in charge of the maps, but I couldn't do it alone. So I created a map system, and then I would hire people, and we would all try to ship these maps to scale. So this group here that you see was a group of people that wound up reporting to me. Now I was 24 years old, and I already knew that I was good at my craft. I already knew that I had a good business sense. But it was there that I realized that I was really good at leading and managing people as well. I was able to motivate people to work together collaboratively on a system and work hard and ship really great quality work. So, I had design chops, I had business chops, and now I had management chops. And those qualities, which came organically to me, served me well, because when I left this company, it was called the Understanding Business, I started my own company. And this was in 1990. And I started out designing, print materials that were, very much informed by information. And I kept getting busier because I was good at my job, and I was good at connecting with clients, and I was good at delivery. And so I just kept getting busier and busier and busier. And what do you do when you get busy? You hire people. So the next thing you know, accidentally, I found a company. And so, over a period of 15, 20 years, this company grew to be about 100 people in 2 locations in San Francisco and New York City. And we were full service. We did everything from business strategy to research to information design, user experience design, visual design, engineering and development, and client management. And this company was called Hot Studio. And Hot Studio was, built over time. And again, remember, I went to art school. I got a bachelor in fine art, just to keep in mind. And so this company became very successful. We worked with clients all over the world, hundreds of clients over a 15, 20-year period. And then in 2013, Facebook, which was one of our clients at the time, acquired us. So that was a huge turning point for design, because it was a point in time when technology companies started recognizing the value of good design. Prior to that, it was all about technology ruling the day. It was all about engineering first, design second, people last. And then companies started realizing it wasn't about the technology that people wanted. Early on it was, because technology was magic in the early days. But eventually people, especially with the iPhone coming out, people started demanding that technology create great experiences for them. And so Facebook had 50 designers at the time. The company was 3,000 people, and they acquired our company. And it was one of the largest design acquisitions that was done at the time. And it made the news. It made the news that Facebook acquired a design company. And suddenly that began sort of this tsunami of technology companies acquiring design companies all over the world, because they started realizing the importance of good customer experience. And so I was a director of product design at Facebook. I learned how to ship products globally at scale. I learned how to work with high functioning multidisciplinary teams in collaboration together. And, I learned that like the smallest change you can make in a product can have huge impacts at global scale. And it was a great time to be working at Facebook. And I was there for about 2 years. And while I was at Facebook, I got recruited to become VP of design at Autodesk. Now, Autodesk is a company that they create software for people who make things, architects, engineers, construction people. And I was the very first vice president of design in a company that was traditionally born out of a technology company. And I can go on and on about my experience at Autodesk, but I won't. But they brought me on because Autodesk started realizing that, their products are incredibly hard to use because they kind of forgot about customers and design. So again, that was sort of many companies like Facebook and Autodesk, and still to this day are catching up and understanding that good products start with understanding customers and serving their needs. And then all goodness follows from there. So I was at Autodesk, and then in 2018, there was a big shakeup at the top, new CEO. I left along with a lot of other senior leaders. And so you can see I'm right back to Hot Studio. So no, I'm not building an empire. I'm not building a large design team now. But what I found, my calling is to build the next generation of creative business leaders. So now I work as an executive coach. I teach at a couple of schools. I'm writing another book on change making. And I love to help people rise up and recognize their greatness. So that's what I'm doing now. So that's a quick history of me. But when you tie all of that stuff together, when you ask, like, that's a pretty good career so far. But when you really think about like what made me successful and continue to make me successful, is because my secret is I treat every business problem like it's a design problem. Again, I did not go to B school. But yet I've built successful businesses, and I consult leaders of successful businesses, and I've led successful businesses. And I do that because I look at everything through the lens of design. And the lens of design starts with understanding what people need, want, and desire, and how to and then you figure out, you go from there. But and that's the secret sauce. The secret sauce is when you can combine your design capabilities with your business knowledge, you can have great success in life. So and that really gave birth to my book, Rise of the DEO. When I was running Hot Studio, I was asked to give a TED Talk. This was in 2011. And I was like, what am I going to talk about? I'm not doing anything special. And somebody said, are you kidding, Maria? You run your company differently than anybody else. And, you run it from a human-centered point of view. And I was like, I do? I didn't know. I thought all companies run this way. And so then I started looking at and asking myself, well, who are some other leaders out there that I deeply admire? What kind of companies do they run? And then really looking at what qualities do they possess? What makes them so good at their job? What makes their companies stand out? And I noticed that the leaders of those companies had these special superpowers, these special qualities. And that's where the DEO was born from, the Design Executive Officer. The DEO is this combination strategic business executive who combines that business knowledge with creative problem solving. So a combination of business and design. And these leaders, again, they're not necessarily, they don't define themselves as designers, but they are creative problem solvers. And they also approach business problems with creativity, and they combine it with metrics. So many business leaders are very metrics driven, and it's a shame because they are cutting off half of what's possible. And when you can combine intuition and creativity with metrics, you are going to get companies that will stand out and be innovative from the rest. And these leaders are catalysts for change. So I'm going to stop there for a minute because I said a lot, and I just want to open it up to any kind of brave souls out there who want to go off mute and take a shot at how they would define design.
Come on, guys, we've had some practice at that. So somebody had some ideas here.
The other thing is you could pop it in chat if you're shy. So how do you define design?
Well, I can give a shot at that.
Yay!
Not an official definition, but I guess it's the main learning I got from this class, which would be finding solutions that are human-centered. And we learned that are one of the first steps to the design process is understanding the need and becoming empathetic is a word that we've used a lot for. From, at least from my experience, also based on these class projects, it's really not about what you want to do and your vision of what's pretty or what's an efficient design, but it's really first understand the person you're designing for, the problem they have, and then go from there. So as a broad general.
All right. Thank you, Francisco. Yes. Anybody else want to take a stab or add to that?
Sure. So Francesco mentioned nowadays a very popular word, empathetic design and stakeholder capitalism. So in the idea where you were speaking, I run my business as a design problem. I'm considering a human-centered approach. I'm taking my stakeholders into account. The idea that your product should not harm those people, and as Francesco mentioned, it's about like solving their problem. That's sort of where we're trying to shift to now. So it's the relevant design problems of today.
Thank you so much, Carter. Great. So excellent. You guys are definitely on the right path. Now,
Can I just
yes.
Can I just throw in another little side?
Yes.
Just from your previous your story, it just reminded me. Everyone has heard of TED, right? The TED conferences and the TED videos and everything. I don't know if anybody in this group is aware that TED stands for Technology, Education, and Design, and it was the original brainchild of Peter Saul Wurman, who Maria referred to right at the beginning. So we've come it's almost that story is the full circle that we've come through, where design was this strange little decorative discipline that people made pretty things with. And Peter Saul Wurman and many, many others, but he was really a light in this, brought it out into the serious world, right there adjacent to technology and education. And we owe him a lot for that. And obviously there's, Chris Anderson has done amazing things with it since then, but it's become a major brand for understanding the world essentially through a design lens. Yes,
thank you for that. Yep. And so he was the guy I was lucky enough to, he was a teacher, a guest teacher, much like what I'm doing here with you guys. He came into the class, and that one lecture changed my entire perspective of the power of design. And to this day, I still carry that mantle about design being in service to others. And exactly right, Carter, it's about doing no harm. It's about being in service to others. And so, when I looked up design in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, because I like to do that and humor myself occasionally, I had to laugh, because no wonder why people don't get what design is. No, it's like, it is, you're taking a class, thankfully, in design, but most people in the world throughout my whole life, when people say, so what do you do for a living? And I say I'm a designer. They're like, oh, are you like an interior designer? Like they don't know what design means. And this is a big problem, not only out in the outside world, but it's very hard. It's still a problem in the business world. Many business schools are starting to teach design, and many design schools are starting to teach business, right? But we have a long way to go before people really embed design and business practices together. And so in this dictionary, you can see like design as a noun. It's like, can you just give me one example of what design is? But it's like number 7, a decorative pattern. Number 8, the creative art of executing aesthetic or functional designs. Number 4, a preliminary sketch or outline showing the main feature of something to be executed. So no wonder why people think design is about, the making of things. And then I like to say design is absolutely a noun. There are artifacts that are created, and great designers design things that people could use and of high quality. Design is also a verb. It's actually to design. And again, look at this dictionary term. Create, fashion, execute, constructing according to plan, to make a drawing, pattern, or sketch. So when I see this, it really like doubles down. These definitions really double down on this notion of aesthetics and execution, which is true, but it's also not complete. And this is the part of design that I call the design doing part, right? There's a process of doing design that leads to creation and execution of artifacts. And when I say artifacts, it could be something like a website, it could be printed, but it could also be a program. It could be a system. Like it doesn't have to be like a product per se. And then the other part of design, which, has taken the business world by storm, is design thinking, which is, indicated by Post-it notes galore. And I love design thinking, and I love the methodology that comes with the term design thinking. But I also have a problem with it because many businesses think, oh, we're going to take a design thinking class and then suddenly we understand design. And so again, it's valid. There's a thinking part of design, but it's not the whole picture. You have to bring the thinking and the doing together. And then there's the last piece, which is what I call design being. So design is a noun, it's a verb, and it is a mindset. And design is a way of being. Design is a way of seeing the world. And you are looking at the world through the lens of serving people's needs. And this is the essence of what I discovered from the DEO. So in my work, in my research, in writing the book, the Rise of the DEO, I looked at, again, many leaders that I admired, interviewed many of them. And I and my co-author, Christopher Island, we pulled out these attributes that they all seem to have that were uniquely different than traditional business leaders. And I'm not going to go through, I'm going to go, I'll just name a couple, but you can read these in detail on Medium. Rise of the DEO is available for free on Medium. So you don't need the book anymore. We made it free. But these are qualities that these design business leaders have that are unique, that make them uniquely qualified to be great leaders in the world today. Big one is change agent. This one is the more relevant than ever before, given that we're living in a pandemic where everything is being thrown, that the ways that we have done things are all being tossed out, and we're all here have to reimagine and redesign the way we run businesses, the way we educate our children, the way we lead companies. So DEOs are well suited to be today's change makers. The other one is risk taking. DEOs, they take risks. They love to take risks, but they take what I say smart risks. They use risk as a form of experimentation. And that's how they can get to innovation. Because if you don't take risks, you're never going to grow and you're never going to change. The third one is systems thinkers. So important. This one is so critically important. Our problems are so complex right now that it's not about problem solution. It's not a linear progression. DEOs look at the entire system and understand that the impact on one part of the system is going to have an impact on another. Great example is like circular economies or supply chain. Like companies are now starting to think about how they create products through the entire process of creation to regeneration. And that's a form of systems thinking instead of I'm just going to design this shoe and throw it out in 3 years. Third one is getting shit done. My favorite. I forgot who said it, but vision without execution is hallucination. You could be thinking till the cows come home. This is where I have issues with design thinking. Design thinking could lead to more thinking if you don't really attach it to doing something. The other two is we talked about the importance of using your imagination and intuition and your creativity. And the last one is about being people-centered or socially intelligent. This is so critical now as we're entering sort of a very human-centered, I would say, culture. And the reliance on one another through networking and social circles. The importance of connecting to people is the very last one. So that's sort of like a quickie in terms of like the qualities that DEOs have. And that's a sense of design being. That's what I mean by mindset. So when I think of today's leaders right now, if you asked me 2 years ago who I would admire, you'd probably get a completely different set of answers. But when I look at the leaders of today and the qualities that they imbue, these are the images that come to mind. So now I'm going to ask you all in chat, I want you to think of leaders of today. What are the qualities that you admire from today's leaders? It could be any leaders. And maybe list a few leaders that you admire also in chat. So let's see what you come up with. Chat is open. Chat is quiet.
Yeah. Don't hold back, guys.
What kind of qualities do you see from today's leaders? Thank you, Matilda. Transparency, goodwill, outspoken. What else? One word is fine. What qualities do you see? Honesty, empathy, perseverance. Beautiful. Higher morality, authenticity, yes. Compassion. Fantastic. Yes, exactly. Now, like, think about this list: authenticity, transparency, honesty, empathy. These are typically not terms that you would see on a business leader's job profile. But these kindness, these are the qualities that today's leaders imbue, because this is what's needed in today's world. In today's world, our leaders have to behave and very, very differently than traditional business leaders in the past. This is a diagram in the book that really shows you the difference between traditional CEOs. It used to be a very top-down executive. And I would say today's leaders are much more bottoms up than top down. Instead of being this authoritative figure, you're there to motivate and inspire and be aspirational. Instead of being a linear thinker, like, I have a plan, we're going to follow a plan, we're going to do one thing at a time. They have to be much more adaptable and be thinking about systems instead of like executing to a plan and the plan being final. It's all about experimentation, improvisation, evolution, iteration. And so these, and then the people-centeredness, the authenticity, the kindness, the empathy, it's really coming out, especially with these leaders. When COVID came out, they didn't know what they didn't know, and they had to lead through the lens of being adaptable based on what they learned. So these are the qualities that will continue to come out of today's leaders. And these are the qualities and the mindset of design that is going to, that these are going to be the leaders that are going to be successful as we come out of this pandemic and beyond. Just real quick, I don't know if you've shown these guys the McKinsey report, Business Value of Design, Neil. Something you might want to print out, and you might want to share that PDF. But for years and years and years, business leaders, as I mentioned, they don't really understand design. They don't understand the value of design. And McKinsey tracked 300 companies over 5 years. They collected over 2 million pieces of data. And they determined that those companies that had design leadership at the top, those companies that led with design or valued design, generated 2x more revenue than companies that did not. And it was the first incredibly valuable report that was able to quantify the value of design in business.
Can I just add in there, Maria, just
Yes.
also about
Yes.
McKinsey? Earlier you were saying that the purchase of Heart Studio by Facebook was a big sort of milestone in design coming into prominence in the business world. The second wave of that was when all the major management consulting firms like McKinsey, Deloitte, et cetera, went on a buying rampage of design firms. And so McKinsey bought Luna Design just down the road. I think they bought a bunch of others on the East Coast. So they put their money where their mouth is, and they said, yes, we believe that design leadership is where it's going. We'd better figure out what it actually is and embodying it in our company. That's
exactly right. And that was a perfect foray into my next slide, where you can see like Hot Studios here in 2013, and then you can kind of see the turning point in 2013, where companies just went on a buying spree. And you can see Accenture, you can see McKinsey over here, Luna in 2015. You can see KPMG, you could see Facebook. This became that turning point that where companies started acquiring design companies. They realized they have been way behind the curve. So, and then over the years, design moved into the C-suite, right? So, I was a VP at Autodesk, first one, but there's tremendous number of chief experience officers all over in companies all over the world. So more and more C-suite are now bringing design into the fold and putting designs at in positions of power that will have impacts on company culture.
Apple has
yes.
had a chief design officer. I don't know if they still call him that, but because Johnny Ive's no longer it. But for a while, Johnny Ive was the chief design officer of Apple.
Yes.
Pepsi had a chief design officer.
Yes,
A number
Mauro
of firms
Porcini.
Yeah, so a number of firms have actually specifically gone there.
Yes, there's chief design officers everywhere in many, many, many different companies. And they, you know, and it's a, you know, it's a very important job. There's a lot of education and learning that they're in charge of, and they have huge impacts on the culture. So it sounds like you understand the design process. It sounds like, based on where you're at in your projects, you all know that when I say you treat every problem like a design problem, there is a unfolding design process. And there are tons of different, you could see, like if you search for design process on Google, you'll see images, tons of images, and you'll see nomenclature, and there's tons of words that define the design process. And yes, design and agile and lean, they all work together when, you know, in good companies anyway. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to just step back, and when I say treat every problem like a design problem, it doesn't necessarily have to lead to an artifact. It is about leading. It's about being a leader. And so this is, you know, you'll see, I don't know if you've seen sort of the very famous sort of double diamond. It looks like a bow tie. This is an ellipsis, but it's the same thing. And the reason why I did this ellipsis as a process is because there's no sharp edges in design process. As Neil said, there's iteration and revision, and there's feedback loops. It's much more circular than it is about a solid line. But it does start with being like, it's a combination of being divergent in your thinking and convergent. And this is the critical piece about design. Design is about possibility. It's not just about solving a discrete problem. It's about understanding the insights and that can lead to the right problem to solve. So, you know, you can call each phase whatever phase you want. But like the very first phase is the most important phase, and oftentimes gets shortened or cut out of design processes, which will bite them in the ass later on. Because if you don't understand your users and you make guesses, chances are you don't know what you don't know, and you're going to be doing a lot of do a lot of rework when you discover that what you think users want isn't exactly what they want. You could have a hypothesis, sure, but it's not a substitute for good research. And remember, I had a company for 15 years. A lot of my clients are like, "Oh, I don't want to spend money on all this research. You should know the problem to solve." And I was like, "No, we would, whether or not they were willing to pay for it, we would do the research anyway. We'd fold it into something else." It's super important to really understand who you're designing for, who you're including, who you're excluding, and really do some research to understand what the problem is. And we used to have a saying at Hot Studio. Clients would come to us and tell us, "Oh, here's the problem you need to solve." And we go, "Yeah, And our job was to tell them what the real problem it was to solve. They would come in with a problem, but that wouldn't be the problem we wind up solving for. And that realization, that reframing of the problem only comes with developing insight in the discovery phase. And once you know who your users are, I hate the word users, once you know who your customers are, the people that you're designing for, the people that you're serving, that's when you can get clear on defining what the key problems are. So how do I apply this as a business leader? How do I apply this as a manager? How do I apply this as a designer? So yeah, there could be a business problem to solve, like we're creating a product or service. But if I'm leading a company, if I'm leading a team, right? Oftentimes there's some business, every company has like goals. They have delivery goals. They have financial goals. They have culture goals. All of that is a design problem in a company. So part of discovery is, if you're internal, is doing the research internally to find out what your reports need, what the company employees need, what their customers need. It still applies, whether it's a product that you're designing or you're designing a program in a company. And then once you do that, you then come into strategy, right? So once you define the problems, then you can come up with a strategy. And this is when you start converging. So divergent is wide, going wide. And then developing a strategy is where you're going narrow, where you're crystallizing your insights and coming up with a core strategy. This is just a screenshot of the core strategy that I came up with when I was VP of Design at Autodesk. And these were my principles. These were my strategic principles as a VP: to build a strong design culture, to focus the company on customer centricity, to connect product experiences together and ship quality products. And so once I developed that core strategy, then I can identify programs to execute against each one of those strategic points, to which I would be assigning teams and to make them accountable with clear deliverables. So that's where strategy comes to play. And then once you come up with those programs, that's when you assign teams to develop the deliverables that go with that strategy. And then once the strategy is developed or shipped, it could be a website, it could be a program, it could be experience, it could be a service, it could be, a voice interface, it could be anything. All of that is designed. Once you ship the first version, that's when you measure, you iterate, you learn, and then you go right back to discovery. That's why it's a loop, right? Because it doesn't end. It's constantly going through this phase. And this is how I have led my entire life. I could put my entire life, even motherhood, into this design process. Okay. So I'm telling you, this is like secret sauce.
Especially motherhood.
Yes. So, when you are in a company or you're on a team, you got your plan, you're like riding high, you want to execute that plan, you plant that flag. Does not ever happen that way. It's more like this journey. You're going to have incredible ups and downs. As you become a leader in your own companies or work for somebody, you're going to be successful. You're going to have some deep dips where you wonder if you are going to get fired. Where are you going to get fired? Then you can have incredible wins. It goes up and down. But the most important thing to know is that you will fail. You're going to fail. It's inevitable, right? And Muhammad Ali was a boxer. He said that, if I never failed, then if I didn't fail, then I didn't take enough risk. So risk is part of failure, right? And so it's okay. It's okay to fail. It doesn't feel great. It sucks, but It's inevitable because failure is about learning. Failure is about pushing it as far as you know you could push it until it fails. And that is, so when I don't know what kind of design problems that you're solving. I don't know about your senior project, but I want you to, as soon as I leave you, I want to challenge you all to look at your final projects and ask yourself, did I push it far enough? Right? Because if you didn't fail, if it didn't fail yet, chances are you're being way too safe. Okay? So that's my gift to you. And no matter where you are in your life, you're going to have your ups and downs, but you will have left your mark. And you're going to have, and this is your mark, and you're going to have a mark on every part of your career and your journey. And, you know, I've had a long career and I still am going. So, you know, Neil and I, we're rocking the white hair, but you know what? We're still building upon every lesson we've learned to get to where we are now. So that is something to think about, that you are in a point in a journey and you're going to be building this wisdom chain your whole life. And that's a blessing. So with that, I'm gonna thank you guys, and hopefully this was helpful. I got applause from Francisco, so I'm that made my day. And this is my information, and I'm happy to stop sharing and answer any kind of questions you might have.
All right, guys, this is a great chance to ask some questions that I'm sure must be nagging at you about what is this design thing that you've come into. You know, you're all business majors. I think you all saw design as a minor, and I'm not sure you've all been real clear what to expect. And I think here is a very clear expression of what you can expect. So a good chance to ask some questions.
I did have a question if there's a chance here. So
yeah, go for it.
We've been talking about the idea of like being able to quote unquote solve the problem or fit the needs. And right now we're at the stage of doing like initial user interviews with the person we're designing for. And
and just to fill Maria in, the assignment is to design a personal brand, and they're working in dyad, and each of them have to design a brand for the.
Yeah, I've done that project before. So you're interviewing each other, right?
Yes. So
and then also each other's friends and family. So there's
oh, it's getting interesting. By the way, Carter, I dig that red light, but keep going.
Yes. The RGB lights are popular these days. So in terms of like taking their feedback, it's not to, you know, discount them, but you know, it's pretty common. Probably we can say outside of this, in a hypothetical situation, the client probably doesn't really know what they want or what they like, or maybe what works. So how should we learn to hear, oh, I like this statements as like pieces of information, because it means that there's something that resonates even if they're just saying that they like it.
Yeah, great question. And you know what, the power of the discovery process is the quality of the questions you ask. So and it's not just interviews, right? You know, like if I was doing a personal brand, I would be asking to see your Instagram account if you let me. I would you know, get a sense. I would ask your friends and family, not what I would ask questions that are more open-ended, sort of like, it's not a, like any kind of questions that yield a yes or no is not a good question. Every good question starts with a what or a how, not necessarily why or or closed-end questions that are yes or no. Like, does Carter like blue or red? That's not a good question. You know, a better question would be like, you know, what colors is Carter passionate about, and why, you know? So when you're asking questions, they got to be open enough so you can collect a lot of information. The best insight comes in the gray zone. It's not usually the best insight doesn't come in answering the question. The best insights come with looking at all the questions as a system and deriving patterns and insights that come out of those questions. Did I answer your question, Carter?
You did in a way, and a way to answer it further would be, how does we, of course, then have our own opinions about the work that we're doing, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
to hit home on the kind of idea that I'm asking, like, so now I have done my work, I've had my interview, XYZ. How am I looking at what works versus what I think?
Okay, so just to be clear, you interviewed somebody, and are you designing their brand, or they interviewed
Correct.
you, you're designing their brand?
Yes, we're swapping.
Okay, so you're not designing your own brands.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're the client, right?
And the designer.
And the designer, yeah. Right? So in the case that you're the client, and the partner is designing your brand, if it doesn't resonate with you, then they haven't really solved the problem. So, and okay, so I'll give you a perfect, and also like having clients in the past, clients may not know how to answer questions properly. So you have to kind of tease out what they really need. So for example, when I used to present designs to a client, they would, the CEO might go, oh, I don't like that blue, change the blue. It's like, that's, you know, or he might say, you know, that picture doesn't work, or, and we would often like go back to, does it satisfy the strategy? Does it satisfy the requirements? So both of you should have like requirements documents. You should have a strategy that you're working off of, so that when you go into design, you're not just blindly picking fonts and color, right? So if that's the case, like another thing I might do if I was your client, I might do like a design strategy workshop with you where I would lay out like a color palette. I would lay out a series of colors on the table, and I'd say, Carter, like, let's talk about color. Like when you think about your brand, like what colors come up, what colors resonate with your personality? And then you might say, okay, you might point to something, and I'd be like, okay, Carter, tell me why you chose that color. What is it about that color that resonates with you? And that's where the answer is. You might say blue is serene, and I feel at peace, and it makes me feel like a sense of clarity. Those are the values that the strategy would pull from. Another exercise I would do for any of you guys who are doing personal branding is like, if Carter, who would be a perfect presenter for Carter's personality? So Carter, if you had to think of a celebrity that emulates what you feel, that emulates the things that you value in life, is there a celebrity that comes to mind that you admire, or that you aspire to be like?
Not really.
No, not one person. Like, well, let me ask you this.
I just don't know that many.
Okay, but who do you admire? Doesn't have to be famous. Tell me somebody you admire in life.
Educators, or like.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't have to be somebody I know. It could be your mother, for example. So just pick somebody that is important in your life.
we'll go with my mom,
Okay.
who is
What
an
is it about your,
educator.
okay, great. Perfect. So what is it about your mom that you admire? Tell me about your mom.
She's of course a hard worker, but she was a very good student and then went on to become a teacher as well. So she, had the calling. So
Mm-hmm.
she followed her passion, I guess.
And how is that important to you?
Because that's of course what I'm trying to do right now as well.
So in that little exchange, I learned more about you than like these just rote questions that may not tease out who you are as a person and what you care about, right? So the quality of asking a good question comes with practice. And then if somebody presents a design to you that doesn't resonate with who you are, then that becomes a dialogue for iteration and learning. So they might, yeah, go ahead.
Can I just add something in there? Because you're pointing at a very important part of the insight gain. Gaining insight is the most difficult thing to do across the board.
Yes.
At any point of the design
Yes.
process, gaining insight. And what Maria is talking about here is she's focusing on the qualities behind the quantity. So, oh, you're attracted to the reds. Well, what are the qualities of the reds that motivate that? Oh, you like
Yeah.
serenity, you like aggression, you like whatever it is, and it's the
Yeah.
qualities that we're driving for. And most
Exactly.
market research is totally focused on quantity. How many?
Yeah.
How big? How wide? How powerful? And mostly people don't. Yes, I mean, you need to check the box. If you're designing a car, it's got to have the right power and it's got to have the right speed and it's got to have the right everything. But it's got to have the right qualities. And
Yes.
getting to design at its core is a qualitative discipline. That's where design is fundamentally and will always be different than engineering. Engineering
Yep.
is a quantitatively driven design process, and design, as we're talking about it, is a qualitatively driven design process. And and you need them both, but
Totally.
insight-driven research is how we get to the quality of the thing.
Yep. Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
So that's an interesting point, Professor. So I have more experience with engineering design and have done that in practice. And I'm thinking about how you're talking about combining those. And to me, when I was designing like a pump or a fan or a hydraulic system, I'm doing a SolidWorks model and I'm doing one
Yeah.
model with all the math to explain every bit, because that is of course correct. There's no way for it to be wrong. It's interesting that SolidWorks also works much differently than maybe a design platform. How would you say that like the tools, and especially because you were talking about how technology was magic back in the days when you can go from a few bits to a few bytes.
Yeah.
And nowadays it's not quite that anymore. And I of course never thought of it as magic. It would just,
yeah. But you know what, I'm
that
going
was
to
never
challenge
there.
you, because I worked at Autodesk. You're familiar with generative design, right? Are you familiar with
I haven't used the word
generative?
before.
Okay, so look it up. But like generative design is using algorithms. So you are putting in all the quant, say you're doing a fan, you put in all of the variables, all the quant information, and then it's an algorithm generator that can spit out hundreds of possibilities that satisfy those algorithms. So in that case, like, again, it's like, I think it's like getting away from this idea that there's only one solution, because even in engineering, even in architecture, there are many different ways to satisfy a condition based on the math. And that's
Indeed.
why that's the beauty of exploration that you get. I always tell people, when you give me one solution, no matter what it is, that's a yes or a no. You don't ever want to be asking somebody to make a decision yes or no, because chances are it's not perfect, so you're going to get a no. But if you give people 3 or 4 variations on an idea, then you're going to be able to create a dialogue, and that'll be a door open to iteration.
Can I just also put a plug in here for a concept that I introduced very early in the semester, which is the idea that design is fundamentally an exercise in ambiguity. There are no right answers. There's always variables. There's always 2 options, 10 options, 1,000 options. And if you can't get comfortable, another aspect of the mindset of the designer is somebody who's very, very comfortable with ambiguity. Very comfortable with uncertainty, because there is no certainty, there is no singular right answer.
Right, and it leads to adaptability and flexibility, which is a very important leadership quality today. Thank you for those questions. Excellent questions. I hope I was helpful there. Look up generative design. You'll find it to be very fascinating if you're working in SolidWorks.
I'm looking at it right now, and it is.
There you go. Okay. Anybody else?
I'll jump in with a question as well. Thank you
Sure.
for the presentation. You early in your slides, you mentioned how a small change in design can have a huge impact in the organization. And I was just like, I started asking myself a few questions. I was wondering what you entail with that necessarily. Does it mean you should not look for reiteration? You should not test your design immediately? Should you wait to be sure you have something valid in your hands? Or does it mean whenever you implement a design, you need to be ready and you expecting change? Could you expand a little bit on that point?
Sure. Okay, so I think there were 2 questions there, Francisco. So I'm gonna. One question was about how design can have an impact on an organization. I'm gonna park that one, but I'm gonna talk about when is it okay to share your work in progress? Is that the question? Yeah. So, you know, I really have always been a fan, whether it's having a client or having a team or having stakeholders in a company. I've always been very transparent with any of those stakeholders. And the way I've been successful is I bring in those stakeholders as co-collaborators, as co-creators. And because I believe that everybody is a designer, even if you're an engineer, even if you're a product manager, even if you're my boss, we are all creative. And if you could bring the problem into the space and solicit feedback as early as possible, you're going to get a collection of ideas. You also might hear biases that are important to know as you are creating designs, because biases will come back to bite you if you don't catch them early. So the sooner you can share your process, the safer it's going to be, and the less it'll make it less difficult to make changes. Right now, you also don't want clients to you don't want groupthink. You don't want everybody designing something, because you're just going to get homogeneous design. So it's really about leading them through a process and asking for feedback in a very clear way. It's like, oh, let's just say I've collected my insight, for example, and I'm going to share my findings. So I don't know if Carter's your client, okay? And you're creating a brand for Carter. You've done your research on him. You might have done some co-creative activities, like I mentioned, like putting out like color palettes and having him pick one. But the more you can bring him into the process, then you're going to build trust with the client. And then when you share your findings early, because he may say, you know what, that's way off. I'm more like this. And it's better to have that piece of information early on that will have an impact on your design rather than waiting to the end to have something tangible where you're way off base. So soliciting feedback along the way and bringing people into the journey with you is going to yield more powerful results.
Let me just add to that also, because I really, that's a perfect answer. That the addition I would say is it matters how well you can communicate whatever ideas you already have. Because if you can't communicate them, then you're just going to have a very confusing conversation, and you're going to have whoever it is you're bringing into the process jumping to all kinds of conclusions. You're going to tend to get to a committee design situation. So it's important that as you as the designer stay in the lead position. You're in the position of sharing what you've discovered, sharing ideas that have come to you from various sources, but telling the story. Remember how centrally we put design is storytelling. There's always a story. And your job is to make sure the story is coherent at the point that you're sharing.
Well, and you bring up a very good point, Neil, because you don't ever want to present a design and say, here it is, do you like it? You've given the client no basis for evaluation. So just like our, I don't know, Carter, if you're an engineer, I don't know if there are engineers here, but engineers work off of requirements. Designers work off of requirements, right? It's the same thing. So when you're presenting a design, you've done your insight work. That is like a strategy document. You might have like a summary of your insights, and that becomes a deliverable. Is this strategy correct? Are these requirements, these conditions, like it could be, you might have form factor requirements. If you're creating a poster or a website, you're going to have requirements on, resolution and things like that. So you have to have like the facts, the requirements, and the strategy. And when you present your final design, you start with those again. You say, here are the requirements we have to work under, and here are the agreements. This is the strategy to which we're creating this design. So then you present your work in the context of that strategy, and you ask the client, have we been successful adhering to the strategy as expressed through this work? Right. That's how we sell design.
Right. And just to put it in the context of how we've been doing it, remember how centrally I said, always have your creative brief present when you're evaluating your work.
Always start with that. Always start with that.
Right. And your creative brief is your strategy in this context. We're doing a very abbreviated exercise, so we're not splitting it out to all these different deliverables, but your brief is your strategy.
That is the strategy, and you usually get that signed off before you actually move to design. Right? Because if the client comes back and says, this is wrong, you need to have a dialogue. You go, okay, well, how is it different than the strategy we agreed upon? So you always kind of bring the client into the requirements. Okay.
Well, we've got a minute left, and I don't want to abuse your generosity, Maria. You've been wonderfully generous with your time. I think you've also offered your email address and contact information. So if you have questions, you've got a wonderful invitation, and I would highly advocate that you take Maria up on that very, very generous invitation. And I just want to thank you really, I want to thank you deeply. You've got such wisdom, and you've shared it totally. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, you guys have superpowers. You do. This is like, like business and design combination is a wicked superpower that's going to serve you well. Okay, I'm out of here. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Maria.
Bye.
Bye.